Hello. Beep, 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 beep. Morning. Yes, once again, putting yourself through the horrors of the court of the Edijester. And what have I got for you today? Well, occasionally something comes along, which is kind of close to where I've been. And this is one of those days. And it's something that I saw coming 5 or 6 years ago, but it is obviously fully here now, as you can see from the headline on today's article. Why is Britain trying to make our nuclear reactors woke? This is an interesting one, not least of all because we are in very dangerous territory when we allow EDI, DEI, woke, and all the nonsense that comes with it anywhere near something like nuclear reactors. It doesn't take an idiot to realise that China syndrome or Chernobyl, there have been mistakes made, in fiction, and in fact, when the absolute need for excellence, talent, merit, all the stuff that comes with it, and also diligence is interfered with by equity or by the state believing it knows truth when it sees it, which is exactly what happened in Chernobyl, because it was their truth that mattered, not the truth of the errors in the building of the plant. This article, written for us by Sam Dumitriu, thank you, Sam, is from the 23rd of October. Sit on a round table of small businesses, as I have on many occasions, and it won't be long before the topic shifts to the maddening numbers of rules and regulations that companies have to comply with if they want to sell to government. Then there's, at one point, vendors are asked about employing people seeking asylum. This is a strange and fundamentally unachievable request. British law bans asylum seekers from working. Since the Social Value Act passed in 2012, that's interesting. There you can see the Social Value Act. That's how far back some of this goes. Companies bidding on public tenders are not only graded on value for money for the taxpayer, note that's you, reader, thank you, Sam, but also on an amorphous concept known as social value. What this means in plain English is that it is no longer enough to provide a good product at a competitive price to win a tender. Bidders that offer worse value for money can still get the contract if they employ more women, offer training to ex-cons, or are in some way greener. There it is. You see? There it is. The equality of outcome that is so dangerous. Equity, red in tooth and claw. It is not a matter of us wanting the best as a government, as a country, through our government. The government now says you don't have to be the best. You just have to be the one that complies with EDI or DEI. In this case, in the nuclear industry. Can anybody else see something going terribly wrong here? Because I certainly can. And I'm really interested to hear from you and whether you think it's possible that something will go terribly wrong. He then says, this isn't a completely absurd idea. All things being equal, a green business employing people who would otherwise struggle to get work is a benefit to the state. But there are clear problems with social value and procurement. I would disagree with you, Sam. It is a completely absurd idea, and it goes totally against meritocracy, intelligence, talent, and excellence, which is the default human state. First, small businesses spot that this ends up stacking the decks against them. Well, most certainly, I've seen this in more than one industry, and certainly it's affected me and other people I know. If you're up against BT, then you will never win on social value. They already have large apprenticeship programs, do outreach with underrepresented groups, and crucially pay people to track and write up these schemes. Even when small businesses do good, they have a much harder time proving it. In other words, this is designed to ensure that what you end up with corporates. The corporates get all the money from the government. Big state versus big business, you know what that is, don't you? This can get very nasty indeed. Second, value for money is not perfectly objective, but it is a heck of a lot easier to weigh and compare than the various social value factors out there. I know of cases where civil servants have complained they have no way of picking between two bids on social value grounds. In some cases, social value factors can deliberately work against innovation. There's equity again. If your business is automating paperwork for the NHS, then you might not provide many opportunities for people who face barriers to employment, even if you ensure more patients get treated. Third, it seems to encourage firms to adopt ineffective woke practices like unconscious bias training. Seems? Sam, I've seen and I've been through the unconscious bias training in the civil service. I can tell you now, it is absolutely about getting them to adopt equity, which is what woke is, equality of outcome. I know of at least one case where a Big Four consultancy won a public tender and then required its subcontractor, an extremely innovative tech startup, to attend mandatory anti-racism training. As they say in the States, your tax dollars at work. You see, so you've got it there. You've got the whole thing there: the the environmental nonsense. Then you've got anti-racism training. How long do we think before it'll look a bit of QI? Hands, knees, and bumps of daisy. People get a look in. But if social value requirements make life difficult for small businesses, they are even more baffling when it comes to our nuclear industry. Here it comes. Nuclear power is clean, reliable, and currently expensive to build in Britain. You can see that in the picture above, or right at the bottom. Britain's track record with mega projects is poor, and a stop-start approach to nuclear investment means the first 2 nuclear power stations Britain will build in the 21st century are the world's 2 most expensive. Small modular reactors, or SMRs, could potentially solve the cost problem by making it cheaper to adopt the fleet approach that has worked so well to contain costs in South Korea in the 2000s and 2010s, France in the 1970s and 80s, and Britain in the 1960s. It is also something we might actually be good at. Rolls-Royce is already world-leading when it comes to making small modular reactors. It is just the ones that they make currently go into submarines. The case for the British state to invest in SMRs is therefore pretty strong. Not only do SMRs have the potential to cut emissions, cut bills, make us energy secure, Britain could, in Rolls-Royce SMR, have a world-leading nuclear business selling plants across the world. So in 2023, Britain launched the Great British Nuclear SMR competition to pick the vendor Britain would use to build a new fleet of nuclear reactors. Then Energy Secretary Grant Shapps declared that it would be the fastest competition of its kind ever. After 2 years, Rolls-Royce SMR had been picked as the government's sole preferred bidder. The initial plan was to back 2 vendors. Britain still hasn't placed a single order for an SMR. Rolls-Royce SMR, however, now entered into negotiation with the government over building reactors in the UK. Some industry experts tell me they expect Rolls-Royce SMR to be built in the Czech Republic before the UK, despite being far further along the regulatory process here. See, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. We are shooting ourselves in the foot. This should be happening. We'd be energy efficient if we had enough of these. In the meantime, Ontario's publicly owned utility company has put in an order for 4 SMRs, with the first set to be online by 2029. The comparison between Canada and Britain is stark. I wanted to know more about why, despite creating the world's fastest SMR competition, Britain has fallen behind. So I sent a few Freedom of Information requests to Great British Nuclear to learn more about the process. After a back and forth over what they can and can't share, I eventually found out 2 things. First, the total amount spent on the competition alone was 22 million. Most of that 19.78 million went to consultants like Deloitte and Arup. Second, the social value component of the tender. It had been flagged by a number of people involved with the process that this would be worth looking into. The official advice is that 10% of every tender should be based on social value factors. 10%. However, Great British Nuclear's competition increased that weighting to 12%. They're creeping in. Great British Nuclear were able to provide all the questions they asked companies relating to social value. In total, there were 26 pages worth of questions covering social values. If vendors used all the space they had available to them, then they would have produced 358 pages of A4 on social value alone. One question in particular stood out. In the section titled Tackle Workforce Inequality, bidders were assessed against a rather ambitious policy outcome. And here it comes. Tackle workforce inequality across characteristics such as gender, ethnic diversity, race, religious belief, sexual orientation, physical ability, and marital status, and achieve 50% gender balance by 2030 for the workforce employed on this TP contract with the contractor and its supply chain. Amen. At one point, the full question asks about employing people seeking asylum, which is strange, as I mentioned at the beginning. The asylum requirement is straightforwardly impossible. The 50-50 gender balance requirement isn't much easier to deliver. The big problem is that not only would the chosen vendor be required to have a 50% gender balance workforce, so too would the companies in the vendor supply chain, and in just 5 years' time. There's 2 reasons to doubt this is achievable. First, nuclear is a male-dominated industry, in part because of many of the roles in nuclear require qualifications that themselves are male-dominated. Engineering departments at British University tend to be dominated by men. Changing this will be complicated. You can't do it. Changing this will be complicated and is unlikely to happen quickly. Of course, firms could game this by having a larger HR department, a female-dominated field, but that would kind of miss the point. No, it wouldn't. That would be exactly the point. That's exactly what they'll do. Second, even if it was possible to solve the pipeline problem overnight, there'd be another big problem, the supply chain. Rolls-Royce SMR would have to require every firm in its supply chain. So if I supply them with buns on a Friday, every firm in the supply chain to make an effort to hire women at much higher rates. Not only would this be tricky, Rolls-Royce SMR as a new entrant probably lacks the power to get its supply chain to sign up to a 50-50 gender balance over such a short time frame. It would be extremely paperwork intensive. Nuclear supply chains are extremely complex. We would be asking SMR vendors like Rolls-Royce to track thousands of companies' progress on gender equality. Is that really a good use of their time? It's utterly insane. It won't just be gender. It'll be trans status. It'll be LGBTQ. It'll be the whole damn lot. The whole damn lot. I wasn't able to get the answers vendors gave for this question, but I suspect they wouldn't have made a commitment to something that would be near impossible to achieve. Building a nuclear power station is complicated enough. Great British Nuclear should make it even harder by demanding shouldn't make it even harder, but demanding near impossible progress on gender overnight. Absolutely bloody insane. This is woke EDI to its fingertips, and I'm really waiting to see what you've got to say about this. Absolute utter nonsense. Get back to meritocracy, intelligence, talent, and excellence. No more bloody special treatment for any group. Any group. This has to stop. The nuclear industry. They're going to start gerrymandering. Oh, we'll take him because he's the right color, the right sexuality, but he's not as good as him or her, right? But we'll take her because she's not quite as good as. Really? When building nuclear power stations? Oh my God, are we heading for trouble if that's the case? Or I'm just a nut job. It's the usual. The usual stuff. This is going to get worse, not better. Labour must go. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.